Sean was an amazing kid, really a son that every father and mother would want to have. He was very popular, both at the high school that he went to at St. Mark's and at the University of Delaware. Had a great job after he graduated from college. But for all of Sean's amazing accomplishments, he never spoke to us about the struggles he was dealing with depression and anxiety. And at that period of time that he was going through his crisis, he found that gun and used it to end his life. I sit here and I just cannot believe that's how I lost my son.
In young people, suicide is now the second leading cause of death. That's ages 10 to 14, ages 15 to 24, and ages 25 to 34. In 3 separate age categories, suicide is the second leading cause of death.
Suicide is a 15 to 40 minute window. The actual thought say, I'm going to end my life right now, is very spontaneous. So if we can take those lethal means out, make it more difficult for the person to end their life, they'll be here the next day.
LVPO stands for Lethal Violence Protection Order, and it's a process for families to request the temporary removal of firearms from the premises during a time of crisis.
That access is pivotal in whether someone lives or dies.
You're giving that person the critical thing that they need the most, which is time.
This law allows us to ensure that somebody doesn't take a drastic step that will change their life forever.
It's about protecting your families, your neighbors, and your community.
These laws pass because they're successful in saving lives where they already have passed.
I want everybody in the state of Delaware to know that they have this tool, this very effective tool to cut down on gun violence. And if it saves a life, that's what we want.
I was elected in November of 2012, and 1 month later we had the Sandy Hook massacre. So that got the legislature looking at what we need to be doing to take common sense measures for reducing gun violence. This was one where a broad consensus was found.
Gun violence is not a left or right issue, it's a life or death issue. And when people from both sides of the political spectrum come together is when we see change happen. The Lethal Violence Protection Order was passed unanimously.
That's unusual, and this was quite bipartisan, which was certainly a cause for celebration. We love being able to bring all sides together and do good work.
The law enforcement agencies throughout our state are well versed in lethal violence protection orders, and they are there to help you and to protect you.
The way that the scenario would play out is a person is having some sort of a mental crisis, maybe a loved one calls the police. We make sure that that person gets the help they need. If an LVPO is necessary, we then take whatever firearms the person may have and we take them to the police headquarters for safekeeping until that person is past that crisis.
That is their mission. It's not to remove the person. It's not to put the person in jail. It's not to put handcuffs on the person. It's to remove the firearm only.
An LVPO does not create a criminal conviction for an individual.
There's a good, clear process that respects the rights of this person that you love.
Our law in Delaware provides that a hearing would then be held within 15 days.
Sometimes the order may be lifted immediately based upon the circumstances.
Most of the time we were able to reach an agreement with the person. They would voluntarily relinquish their weapons and get some assistance.
We don't talk much about suicide, and if you don't talk about it, you can't learn about it, and you can't be on the lookout for it, and you can't help prevent it.
When we talk about maybe folks that are depressed or having struggled with mental illness or just in very kind of traumatic domestic situations, a gun in the house can be somewhat dangerous.
There are so many reasons why people have a temporary crisis, and the presence of a firearm turns that into a permanent tragedy.
There's a myth that if someone is suicidal, they'll always be suicidal and there's nothing you can do. But the reality is 90% of people who survive a suicide attempt do not go on to die by suicide.
If a firearm is involved, they're far more likely to die by suicide. It is the most lethal means.
When you use a gun, it's immediate. There's no going back.
So if you're worried about someone, but you're also concerned they might get angry at you, consider this. Would you rather they be angry at you for a brief time, but they're here tomorrow? Or would you rather they're not going to be angry, but they might not be here tomorrow?
I believe strongly in the Second Amendment. However, if you know you are dealing with a loved one that is dealing with mental illness, I think you owe it to them to make sure they live in the safest environment possible.
The statistics will show you that it's someone in the home who will use a gun to harm themselves. So if you're truly interested in protecting your family with a firearm, then you have to protect them from every situation.
So preventing gun violence does not just save the life of the person who potentially was involved, but it also saves the long-term health and wellness of so many other people in the community.
You know, I would do anything to have Sean back right now. It's been over 3 years now, and my heart breaks every single day. His absence is huge.
If you're concerned about a loved one, the first thing I would advise you to do is look at the help that is accessible to you.
You don't have to tackle this on your own. There are resources.
Look up the LVPOs. They are safe. They will not put your loved one at risk, but they will save lives.
You can call your local law enforcement, or you can call the local court system and request the temporary removal of firearms. You can go in and say, I am worried about my loved one, and they will help you.
Ask for law enforcement who has additional training in a mental health response. Let them know that your loved one is in a mental health crisis.
At the very worst case scenario, we will go there and ensure that that person is safe and sound. And the best case scenario will be that we will save that person's life.
And it's much better to have raised the alarm twice for one problem than to raise it 0 times for one problem.
We always think, well, somebody else will do it or somebody else will act, but you need to be the one to do this.
If we can make sure they're protected in that small window period, it's well worth it. It's well worth it.